The following special presentation of your Hometown Health Connection Community Conversations, Heal, Talk, Act, is presented by Buffalo Healthy Living Magazine with support from the Buffalo Federation of Neighborhood Centers, Karamia Pet Resort, Circuit Clinical, Endeavor Health Services, Medical Society of the County of Erie, the National Federation for Just Communities, People Incorporated, Community Services for Everyone, Horizon Health Services, Spectrum Health and Human Services, Best Self Behavioral Health, and WBBZ-TV.
Hello, I'm Sandy White with John Sciullo. You know, we have pledged to never forget the racist, hateful attack that took the lives of 10 people and injured 3 others on May 14th. To that end, we are having conversations through the remainder of this year and hopefully beyond to encourage members of the community in honest and sometimes difficult conversations. Our goal is to better understand our complicated past so that we can create a healthier and just future for us all.
And as we continue our candid community conversations to address some of the topics that have come to the forefront as a result of that tragedy, we are thrilled to welcome Francesca Mesiah, the Senior Marketing Associate of Outreach and Community Relations and Executive Director of the Near East and West Side Task Force at Collide Health. Francesca has much to share from her rich experiences, her education, and especially stories about her late father, Frank Mesiah. So I'm pleased to join with Francesca and our co-host, Sandy White, an award-winning news reporter and anchor who has worked in both Buffalo and Los Angeles, current president of the Mustard Seed World Consulting Group. Now, before we get started, Francesca, I know you wanted to offer just a brief memorial for those who lost their lives in that recent July 4th fire.
Yes, for the Daniels and Givens family, just briefly recognize
Well,
thank you.
The beautiful family who impacted our community, and it was certainly a tragic loss. As we get started, Francesca, I knew your father. I used to produce AM Buffalo and was at Channel 7 for a long time. And I remember him being so much the catalyst for so much change, staunch community advocate ahead of his time. I remember a program he did where he was advocating the legalization of marijuana long before it became, in the public vogue. So I guess we start with, what your father was like, and then of course, Sandy, you want to add to that too, with what your family was like.
I just want to say, growing up was exciting. Every day was like a lesson. You had lessons in the home from dad and mom, but lessons about always being respectful to people and listening. Always listen, because if you're talking, you can't listen. If you're talking and not listening, you can't learn. And it was always about, what did you learn in school? If there was some type of an altercation, what was the lesson that was learned? So, having a multi-generational dinner on Sundays, we learned, you listened. Everyone was respectful of each other. Being respectful, listening, learning, don't be afraid to ask questions, but be respectful.
Francesca, where did you grow up? And were you always from Buffalo?
Always from Buffalo, born and raised in Buffalo. Parents born and raised in Buffalo. Starting off, I don't recall, but we were on Humboldt Parkway until the expressway came in, and it was eminent domain that we then moved to to Crescent Avenue, Parkside Community, and we moved at a time, again, I was only 3, so of course these are stories, lessons learned. When we were 3, my parents had to go, even though it was an African-American realtor who showed them the home, Mrs. Hill, I believe was her name. Mrs. Hill had to go for the sale of the home, they had to go through a white realtor, because at that time, African-Americans could not show homes on the west of Main Street. So this would grow. There was a black family next door. I don't know how they got, how they were able to move in, but at that time, I know that there were not very many, not only weren't there very many African Americans, although my father was a Korean War veteran, blacks could not take their money and move in the suburbs. So even though you had a loan, you had the money you received from, serving our country, you were not able, because it was before the housing rights, civil rights, I believe, of 1963.
But the Parkside area was very interesting, according to the notes I read.
Oh, yes. Oh, no, it was very interesting. Our neighborhood was, we had an East Indian family on the one side, African-American family on the other, Greek family around the corner, Italian, Polish, Irish. So I just thought, growing up, that everybody lived in communities that were diverse,
Your father was such a great leader and highly educated. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, Dad went to Grover, Cleveland. His father was the one. Pa was from Muscle Shoals, Alabama, and his mother was from New Orleans, but they believed in education. They knew education was the way to elevate yourself, the way for mobility and such, but then he from Grover, after going into the service, he then went to Buff State, majored in education, had a certification K through 8, K through 6. Then he went on to receive a master's in education administration, and then later on worked on a PhD, but it's called ABD, everything but the dissertation, because he would have to have taken off from work, and he had a wife and 3 girls at home.
Beautiful girls. What do you think inspired him to fight against discrimination?
Well, when he was a police officer, because Dad grew up on the West Side, there were only a handful of African-American families at that time, but we were Catholic. I'm the only Baptist now in the family, but we grew up Catholic, and I would say it's from the New Orleans, from family coming from New Orleans. But when he was a police officer, the precinct was on Fillmore Avenue, across from Fillmore near Broadway, right around the corner, and he was asked to cover Malcolm X. And my mother said after he covered Malcolm X, he was just a totally changed person in terms of just, he said what he was saying it wasn't radical. Like they were like, oh, Frank, go cover that radical guy. But he said Malcolm X made a lot of sense, the things that he was talking about. And from there, he got involved in NAACP. From there, for many years, he was involved with the desegregation case. And the desegregation case is what found the Buffalo Public Schools intentionally segregating the public school system. So with CCHR, Citizens Council for Human Relations, NAACP, those are 2 of the organizations that not only sued the city and won, because they were able to go into the schools on east of Buffalo and west of Buffalo, showing how the books on the west side, on the west of Main Street, then the schools that were west of Main Street, the books were in better condition, the books were newer, the schools were cleaner than east of Main Street, so they were able to show. Again, I don't have all the details about segregation. Then from there, they went after some of the country clubs. And the country clubs, knowing liquor license, so they then, the same group basically went to the country clubs and said, if you don't let African Americans, again, they were able to show there were no blacks, there were no women, there were no, some of the country clubs, Jewish people weren't even allowed in the clubs. So you went after the liquor license. That's where you make a lot of money. And then after that, when they knew, people know when they're doing wrong. Bottom line, people really do know. Sometimes it's just an awareness.
So you fought that discrimination your dad did, but it seems like with such a man of conviction, he must have influenced you in disciplines all through life.
Correct. So for instance, in 2nd grade, a little 2nd grader, right? And you're reading Dick and Jane. Dick and Jane are basically about 2 white children, Dick, Jane, Pony, right, and the apple. And there was a book I remember my father had brought home one day, because he was a teacher, elementary school teacher, and they were two African American, and throughout you'll come and use African American and black, two African American kids, just like Dick and Jane. And we read the book, and he put attached a note to the book. I was in 2nd grade, and said, "Give this note to the teacher," and with the book. And when he told me what was in the note, basically it was just asking the teacher if she could order this book. Again, he was an educator and knew it wasn't that difficult to order books. And then the teacher that day gave me back, handed the book back to me. And it must have said no, because I never saw that book in class. And then even in high school, I remember I brought home the recommended reading book, and my father said, there are no black authors on this list. And he said, go back and ask the teacher, and he gave me the list of books to read and ask if it was okay, acceptable. And the teacher said, oh, yeah, sure. So began, by 6th grade reading books by black authors, and then in religious instructions, because again, Catholic, and we sat down and we talked about Jesus Christ. Blonde hair, blue eyes, showing me where Jesus was born. How is this possible that he has blonde hair and blue eyes when no one else? So when I asked the nuns right before confirmation in 6th grade, confirmation named Joan of Arc. And on the way out the door, the nun said, I didn't have to come back. Well, I thought, because I was so smart, and I had given them this new awareness. And my parents said, they kicked you out. I said, no, they didn't. They didn't kick me out, because it was never adversarial in terms of asking questions. And then my sister, I had started going to the Newman Center after that, because I was just asked not to come back.
Wow,
yeah.
Amazing that.
But the whole lesson there was not to be afraid to ask questions, but have your facts.
Yeah.
It's so important. I heard that something very upsetting happened to you when you were in the 4th grade.
In 4th grade, you're playing with your dolls, you pick up the phone, and someone threatened to bomb the house. And because my father at that time was very involved in, civil rights, and very involved with the school desegregation case and different things. I don't know. There were always people in and out of the house. There were always meetings. And when I picked up the phone and shared with my mother said, oh, it's okay. I'm like, what? And then when my father came and said, someone said they're going to bomb the house. And he said, oh, your grandfather gets that all the time. But as a 4th grader, how do you go back and tell your friends what happened? Because they're going to probably call you a liar. You're in 4th grade. And then it made me open my eyes in terms of what exactly was going on. From a young age, it made me slow down and say, and why would someone want to hurt us? I mean, there was nothing that he was doing to harm anybody.
Were your sisters affected by it in any way?
No, not the same. No, because they didn't pick up the phone. I mean, seeing people, all walks of life, seeing people interacting. You went to bed at night. They were, mom would take you out and had to say goodnight to everybody, and they'd have papers out and different things as they were working on whatever legal strategies, and it was just a way of life. And one of my friends even recently said she learned to be polite at our house. I said, what do you mean? She said, you always had people in the house, and you always, you always had to introduce, herself, and I just chuckled.
So as Malcolm X influenced your father, how did that incident with the life-threatening phone call influence you?
It influenced me to realize to pay attention. It made me realize that there are mean, back then, there are mean people in the world. There were hateful people, and the things that my father was working on was always about people coming together. Even if people were not necessarily, who may have not have been on your side, but when people had the facts, helping people to overcome fear, helping, because desegregation, having your child get on a bus and go across town can be fearful. It was new, so in terms of how it affected me, it just made me realize that when things are new, not to be afraid, to ask questions, You know, bring people together. Sometimes people are afraid just because they're not invited to the table.
Yeah.
But once they're invited to the table, it helps that fear to disappear.
How important is mentorship to you, and who have you mentored along the way, just as your father mentored so many people?
I've mentored students through Kaleida. We've been working with high schools for years through Kaleida Health and other jobs. And mentorship, giving students a confidence. I have a tool that I work with students. And it's, if somebody were to give you a wish, and these are anywhere from 6th grade on up. And a lot of times people may want to do something. It may not be within their sphere. I mean, if you're 4'9", and you want to be a college basketball, you're a female, you want to be a basketball star. It's not to say that you can't be a basketball star, but through mentorship, if you enjoy basketball, why not be an accountant with the WNBA or with the NBA? So with mentorship, a lot of times it's opportunities. And I stand on shoulders. These aren't my shoulders. These are my ancestors' shoulders. And so through mentorship, just sharing the lessons, making the lessons seem achievable, because again, sometimes mentorship is only a snapshot. But I've been mentoring students for life, making them understand the importance of studying. Like a lot of times people want to be a lawyer. Do you like to read? No. Well, we got to start there.
I think that helps.
You know, that helps. And get involved in, reading on topics you like to read about. Volunteering. A lot of times people don't think they're volunteering. Well, are you working with your little siblings every day? Mm-hmm. That is volunteering. That is helping. You know, and how to, open the door for the principal. Have you ever thought about when you see a teacher walk in the school? Opening the door so people begin to get to recognize you who you are in a positive way.
Volunteering is so important, and you can open the doors for your future, but it's by doing that. I'm curious, what did you study in college?
Sociology, SUNY Albany, sociology, urban planning. And then my graduate degree was an interdisciplinary degree in public policy with a concentration in elder care.
Perfect.
With elder care. I was kind of discouraged a little bit, but I'm a people person, and it was all about policy for elderly services, and there are 3 different levels of elderly. That was a sociology of the, maybe it was that sociology of the elderly course that I took that really made me realize what are the policies and such.
Very important, as Sandy and I know, the senior population and those who are elders, and they're growing by the minute.
Absolutely.
And Erie County's always had that population. Yeah.
What do we learn about people? What did you learn about people in the course of just your journey?
My journey, when I started out in housing on the east side and working in banking, working now, everybody wants the best for their life. Mm-hmm. Everybody wants a quality of life. If you only have $10,000, well, then it was $10,000, or if you have a couple million sitting on your account, in a bank. Everybody.
Do you have that money, John?
In my pocket.
But everybody wants quality. Everybody wants just to live a good life. Nobody wants to be without. Nobody wants a leaky roof. No one wants their child to be without. We have in common. Everybody wants a decent home. Everybody wants the best for their children. So I guess it's a matter of finding that what is it that everyone has, not everyone close to it, has in common that brings us together, that can bring us together.
Buffalo is a city of neighborhoods. We have East Buffalo on the west side and North and South Buffalo. Talk to us about the task force in the specific areas of the cities that you work with and what that does.
The Near East and West Side Task Force began about almost 21 years ago at Gethsemane Baptist Church under Reverend Reed. Yeah. And it started with a .22 caliber killer. When there's a gentleman who was going around randomly killing African American men. And it was a group of leaders, basically African American leaders, that realized something had to be done. Around healthcare, Gethsemane Baptist Church is located in the Fruit Belt. So that's where it was called the East Side Task Force. But then working closely with the West Side, basically the Latino community, they had a very similar structure, working on the west side. So one of the leaders there, Andres Garcia, said, let's bring, because he was with Kaleida. I had just started with Kaleida. How about the two groups coming together? And someone came up with news, Near East and West Side Task Force. Our focus is education and health. And we do lots of outreach, community outreach. We also have a speaker series. We have workshops, but it's educating, working with families, individuals, Buffalo's East Side and Buffalo's Lower West Side. And it's several organizations who are both in, like all the hospitals are part of the task force, clergy.
It's good to hear everyone's working together
universities,
like that.
Universities where people are, and who isn't interested in people? Who isn't interested? What entity is not interested in reaching out? What health insurance company? What hospital? What university? You know, who isn't interested? Again, health and education, in coming together,
Yeah.
and that's what we do. We come together every month.
That is very encouraging. Your thoughts on how we can make Buffalo better, a better place to live? We're here, we stayed in Buffalo. What do you think we all need to do?
You know what, I remember when I first heard that word, Buffalo Strong. What does Buffalo mean when you say Buffalo Strong? Because as Buffalonians, everybody knows what strong means. You know, strong is, it's not only is it physically strong, it's mentally strong. It's everyone coming together, coming out of your silos, or as my sister in Texas says, coming out of your barriers, because she didn't understand what I meant by silos. Breaking down the barriers, sitting at the table and pointing to a carpet. You know, because when families sit down, they just don't talk about health, or they don't talk about education. They talk about jobs. They talk about their future. And everyone coming together to realize, yes, your organization is important, but how can we together collectively bring everything we all do together for that family to meet their needs and meet that family where they're at. And the task force does a lot of right there in the community outreach.
Well, that task force and other community organizations have all come together in light of the recent tragedy.
Oh yes, yes, we've been working.
And I have to ask what you've learned from it, what we've learned from it, but what do you think your father would have thought or reacted to the events?
I think that one thing that he would have said, because the East Side has been the East Side for a long time. I mean, in terms of its condition. And this TOPS just really lifted the cover, lifted the hat. It showed a lot of the ugliness. And through that ugliness, it's brought people together. Like before the show began, we were talking about the collaboration with art. And I know there were a couple of hundred people that were over on Jefferson. But what it's showing is that people are saying, well, there's only one grocery store. How did that happen? So instead of people just saying, oh, there's only one grocery store, now it's, oh, there's only one. How can we work together towards building another grocery store,
so many people.
A better grocery store, a better sidewalks, better education. So to me, this tragedy has brought this massacre, racial massacre, has also brought people together realizing that race matters, it still exists. And how we can continue to work together. There are many organizations out here. You know, NAACP, Urban League, NCCJ, you know, Women's Tech, you know, there are so many groups. Hispanic Women's League, I guess because I've been part of so many organizations. And a lot of what I do is bring people to, because people don't know. There's so much good work in Buffalo.
Well, you grew up in that whole environment with your dad running the NAACP and being a Buffalo police officer and doing so many other things. I know, Sandy, you have some information on where we can find out more about Francesca.
Yes, Francesca, you are on the radio. You're on Great Lakes Radio at Power 96.5 FM, WFO 1080.
Yes.
You're on the air.
Yes, every other week at 7:30 in the morning, 7:30 to 8. It's the focus is more on health, because without your health, you know, one of the questions I'll ask sometimes, if people aren't stopping at my table as I'm doing outreach with Kaleida, I'll say, you want to interest how to get $1 million? And people are like, Yeah, $1
Yeah,
million.
sure, I'll take
Your
that.
health. Have you had your screenings? So a lot of the programs, we talk everything about COVID. We talk about screenings. We talk about infant health. We talk about adult health, women's health. But it's with the professional, not always a doctor or nurse, whoever that professional is. It could be any department, that's on, and talking about looking at through the eyes of someone's in the community, sitting there having toast or coffee or yogurt with their neighbor, and a topic that is of interest.
Well, in addition to the radio station, I think Sandy will agree, we'll probably now add WBBZ to your list of call letters.
Right, absolutely. Tune in, absolutely.
I know it's important for people to volunteer, isn't it, Francesca?
It's very
in so
important.
many of these organizations.
Yes.
They need it, and that might be another reason that these lives were not lost in vain, that people are going to step up, they're going to try
And they
to
have
do what they
been.
need to do.
They have been.
Change is coming.
And change and faith, faith of a mustard seed. I always think of Sandy's company and I really do believe if you have the faith of a mustard seed, it can happen. If someone says no, it's like why not? That's what I was taught. Why not? Why can't it happen? Sometimes change is slow. Sometimes people feel it's slow, but especially with legal, a lot of things are legal in change, but you can affect change. You can't just say nothing will happen. No, everyone has to work together.
Well said.
Yep. Sandy, we're out of time.
All you need is just a little bit of faith to move mountains. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
That faith of a mustard seed?
you
Well, I
go.
just want to say we're a little bit out of time here, but what a rich amount of time we've had. And I know you want to join me in thanking Francesca Mesiah for joining us. We will be continuing these important community conversations on WBBZ, produced in partnership with Annette Pender and Buffalo Healthy Living Magazine. Be inspired to make that change, and thank you for watching.
Thank you, Francesca. for
Thank
joining
you.
us.
Thank you so much.
This special edition of your Hometown Health Connection Community Conversations, Heal, Talk, Act, was presented by Buffalo Healthy Living Magazine with support from the Buffalo Federation of Neighborhood Centers, Karamia Pet Resort, Circuit Clinical, Endeavor Health Services, Medical Society of the County of Erie, the National Federation for Just Communities, People Incorporated, Community Services for Everyone, Horizon Health Services, Spectrum Health and Human Services, Best Self Behavioral Health, and WBBZ-TV.